international trade issues, privacy issues, internet security issues, and even cultural linguistic issues. So again, I would say even just up until about 2 years ago, we were an organization of people, very technical people, that felt that they wanted to just do the very technical function and hope that the rest of the world would appreciate us but leave us alone. But we learned very quickly that our work touches all of these areas that are very important for people, either in a personal way or an economic way. So again, this is the reason for our outreach and our expansion into the world. So business as a stakeholder. So for business and entrepreneurs, I always like to mention, of these 4 stakeholder groups, the big categories that I talked about, I think it's really business that has given the momentum, that's really been the driver of the Internet's expansion, whether it's to find new markets or to offer new services or to find more efficient ways to deliver old services. It's really the push and the drive of business, I think, that has been a locomotive for the multi-stakeholder model. And the first example is the statistic I mentioned already today, the 2.7 billion people on the Internet, with the next billion soon to come. If you're a global e-commerce company, that's very good news to you. The Internet is your delivery sales channel. The domain names or your website are your storefront. And this is really just one example. A couple of the innovations that are coming up that are important to business and get the most attention when I address audiences, business audiences, are 2 of the innovations that, again, have come through this multi-stakeholder model in a bottom-up process. And they're called new generic top-level domains and also internationalized domain names. So you may have heard about new generic top-level domains. And this term, we're very fond of acronyms at ICANN, is sometimes shortened to new GTLDs. Last year, ICANN took in about 1,900 applications for new top-level domains names. So what is a top-level domain? If you're familiar with the existing 20 or so, 22 .com, .org, .biz, .info, and so forth. In addition to those, and the country codes, which are 2-letter domain names, .tr for Turkey, .it for Italy, the generic top-level domains could be .anything, .brands, .books, .trees, .istanbul, in fact, is one of the applications that's currently going through the process. So if you can imagine an era, if it's successful, a couple of years from now, the concept of .com will be greatly diminished because .com will just be one of many options that you can use. So this gives an opportunity for small companies or for businesses that were not able to get their .com address. They may find another extension, a top level that they want to put their space on the Internet under. People that are applying for these will in fact run a piece of the Internet, so they will be the registry taking applications. Some big multinational companies are going to use these as protected trusted client relationship parts of the Internet. So if you're buying a product from a luxury brand company, if you go to .luxury brand, you'll know it's them that you're talking to. At the same time, this program has raised a lot of concerns. So there's the issue of intellectual property protection. The brands or trademarks that companies have will need protecting so that they're not registered and used maliciously. And in fact, ICANN is, interestingly, I find on the forefront. We have one global database that's available to register every brand or trademark in the world. So even though there are countless legal regimes for IP, the Internet is just one Internet. So there needs to be some global repository. So we've created a database so that companies can say, these names belong to me in this jurisdiction, and if someone on the other side of the world is trying to use that name, let me know. So again, that innovation itself came through that multi-stakeholder model that I showed before. Also, there are technical issues again. So if you're an internet service provider or if you're a telecom company and you're providing access to the internet, you need to have your software and your hardware configured to make these new web domains accessible to people. The second example on this slide that I want to talk about is something that I find also very inspiring and something that came up from the bottom-up model, and that's called internationalized domain names. These exist already for some country codes in Cyrillic, in Arabic, in Chinese. They are very successful, and there's huge demand for them. They did not exist up until now in the generic space, so a brand or a .com or what have you. And now, under this new program, there are internationalized domain names. So what does that mean? That means that people in India that use Devangari, or people in China that use Mandarin script, or Japan, they won't have to change their keyboards. They can navigate the internet using their existing alphabet that they know. When I travel in Asia, I'm always amazed. I look at billboards, and I see in Japan, for example, a billboard for a cosmetic product. And it's all in Japanese, so it means nothing. It doesn't register with my brain at all. But at the bottom of the billboard, there'd be a web address, and it's www.jp3. It's my alphabet. I can read that. And then I think, well, what a pain it is for a Japanese consumer who's on his computer and wanting to get to the site to have to type in those Latin characters. So anyway, I think it's very interesting and will help us in the next billion people, the people who will be joining on mobile devices in very rural parts of the world to access and navigate the internet. So in terms of the internet's expansion, or in terms of innovations in the way that people gain access to it, there are benefits here for business and all people to benefit from. Some of the technical innovations include security extensions for domain names. So there are many ways now that we can provide more security, that when you're looking for information on the internet, that you know you're getting the information from the website you're looking for and not from an imposter. That's a program that's called Domain Name Extension Security, DNSSEC. And if you followed any of the news about Internet Protocol addresses, you know that perhaps we ran out of them. There was a system of addresses with 10 characters so that everybody's device could have one. Well, the billions of devices in the world mean that actually those numbers ran out. So within the last year, we rolled out, with some other organizations, a version 6 of the IP addressing regime. And again, now it's practically infinite. There are as many addresses as there are stars in the observable universe. And there are people who are working to bring the internet to outer space already. So a couple of questions I probably will pose for the group. In this issue of active participation for entrepreneurs, my sense is that entrepreneurs themselves are so busy running businesses and in their startup world and living their business work that they don't have time to participate in policy making, and they may not even have time to follow some of these developments. And I think there is an opportunity that we're missing, because I think if business entrepreneurs get involved earlier in our process and tell us their ideas, internet policy may develop to realize some of those. And then secondly, if they're able to follow the development of policy, they may be able to start businesses or come up with concepts that will profit from those, and creatively. So that's going to be the question I pose to you, is there a way to get entrepreneurs more involved in the work of ICANN, if you have ideas? In my role as Vice President for Business Engagement, I speak with a lot of established businesses, and I go in and I say, this is how much of your revenue depends on the internet, how much of your operations, and so forth, and here's why you should care about ICANN, and please follow us on Twitter, and or invest and send somebody to our meetings. But there are other categories that I find are a little harder to reach. We do have fellowships for our meetings, so we do get young business people who apply We're accepting applications now for the November meeting in Buenos Aires. So if you have business students that you think would be involved in this topic, please have them look into ICANN fellowships. And then the last point, which is a very important one, and another reason that we're doing the outreach and the communication that we're doing now, is the model that I showed, the bottom-up stakeholder, multi-equal stakeholder model. It needs continual improvement and continual strengthening with new voices, new faces, and to reflect the people that are on the internet now. And not everyone agrees with it. So in some regions of the world, from place to place, there are governments and populations that are more comfortable with a top-down approach or with more of an intergovernmental approach. And there are pushes to suggest that the United Nations or a related agency should take over this function. And those of us that work in the field, we actually feel that this would be less efficient and less innovative. So, but we have to continue to be efficient and innovative to prove that the model is working. So that's another reason that we're always seeking to improve it. So some places would give up that dynamism for a little bit more control, particularly in places where, countries where suddenly the internet is everywhere and it's being given credit for social or political change. And so a lot of leaders are, they look into how is it organized and who runs it, and then they find these and they say, well, you know, who do I call? So it's a very interesting concept, this governance coordination model. We are not the only organization that works in it. On this side of the diagram, there's a whole list that's all acronyms. It's like alphabet soup, as we call it. But they're all the organizations. If you're more of an engineer, you can join. There's one in particular which is called the Internet Society, which you can join as a business or as an individual. And it's a very good way to passively keep up with these developments if you're interested in them. So my second question for you, or my invitation for you, is there's precious little academic research either using our model as a case study for either for innovation, so some of these innovations I talked about and how they came about, or even applying this model to other global issues. So if you think of cross-border issues like climate change or pandemics or others that have shown that intergovernmental approaches don't always have the most effect, if we can really show that our model is working for the internet, maybe it's one that we can apply to other global shared resource issues. So this is just a list of some of the resources. If you do want to follow us on social media or learn more about our organization, I think I have the Internet Society website up there as well. I hope at a minimum that I've helped to explain a very complex but very important set of processes, and at a minimum that now you're not going to take them for granted. At a maximum, if you want to become involved or if you want to encourage your students or colleagues, come join us online remotely, come to South Africa next month, add your voice to those voices that are working in this area. And somewhere in the middle, between the minimum and the maximum, if you want to stay there, just know that we're working to serve you and the rest of the 2.7 billion people on the internet that each of us is connected to. So thank you very much for your time. I'm very happy to take questions. Any question? Apologies if I was talking too fast. Yes, sir.
Thank you for interesting introduction. Didn't know that much about ICANN. Do you have any examples of people who has made business out of ICANN? Not you as such, but entrepreneurs who have started up something that was based on what you are providing?
Yes, there are. There is a whole category it's actually a business sector which is known as domain name registries and domain name registrars. And I will admit to you that this is a sector that really didn't exist until about 15 years ago. And at the beginning, there was very much a little bit of a land grab. You may have heard of cyber squatting, or people buying up domain names and selling them to companies and so forth. And so this is a stakeholder group. They have a stakeholder group in our model, and a lot of people criticize them, and they say they're the ones making a lot of money off of the work of ICANN. However, I will say that in recent years, this particular industry group has worked to improve their image, improve their reputation, police themselves, and they don't really have sort of this, they have less of the cowboy image that they had at one time. And they are forming new businesses around the new generic top-level domains, selling services that are related to them. There are a lot of consultancies that have come up around that. The thing about generic top-level domains, one of our mandates is to promote competition and innovation. And the thing about innovation is you can't predict innovation. And these new names are just now coming onto the internet. And so you're beginning to hear what some companies are planning to do with them. So I attended a conference recently, and the French cosmetic company L'Oreal has applied for .L'Oreal, and I think also .Beauty too. And they have the technology and the ability. What they're going to do is put all of the traffic to their commercial sites under those names, and then they will have access to all of the data, the statistics, the movement of the customers, the number of seconds their eyeballs are looking at this screen or the next screen. And they're going to try to personalize that also to people, just as you experience already, but on a much more intimate and in a trusted way. So you're now, it's as if you're in our, as their chief digital strategy officer described it, it's as if you've walked into our boutique and you're having a conversation with us. The financial services industry, too, is using this, again, for security, luxury goods for security. There's talk that some organizations that have applied for these names will give away free web names or free websites or free internet addresses for people. So those are not so much small business innovations, but digital strategy departments in big companies they're going to show us innovations we haven't thought of yet. So I'm very excited to see them. And we'll be seeing them by the end of the year. Yes, sir.
I have two questions. Maybe these questions are a bit far away from a specific mission of your organization, but maybe you have your personal view. The first recent weeks, this discussion around US Big Brother, who is checking and controlling all and have this backdoor in Google and other places. So maybe you would like to comment how you see this problem and what would be the future development in this field. And then maybe the other side of the coin, I personally feel that credit cards are such very ancient thing, which is has become actually quite dangerous. Mm-hmm. Lot of transactions where you even reserve a hotel or anything, you have to give your credit card number, and it can be used without any control later, and evidently there is a market for such data. But do you see a development where really in certain type of internet use everybody should verify his person by using some smart card which is on mobile ID or that without giving away such sensitive data which can be misused?
Yeah, thanks.
What would be your vision? What will be the situation after 10 years? Do we still use the same ancient way to verify credit card data? Or
It's a very good question. Two very good questions. Thank you very much. The issue of the PRISM project and the other projects of U.S. security services, mining data. So first of all, from the ICANN perspective, in terms of technically, we don't control any of the content, and we really don't control the access. We just make the roads, we make them available. What happens with an issue like this is that the internet started as a United States invention. And it started as something that was funded by the U.S. Defense Department in California universities. And then some of you may remember, it spread among universities. And then in the 90s, it became more of a commercial vehicle. Then it was moved to the U.S. Department of Commerce, not the Defense Department. And then in 1998, ICANN was created under this. It's a non-profit, which is registered in California, but we work as an international organization. So the internet is really sort of this gift to the world, but it started where it started. And so there's a very strong perception around the world that the U.S. influence, or there's more U.S. control or influence than there should be. The image of, we joke about the image of the giant switch in my office that I can just turn off the internet like this, and that's absolutely not true. It's a network of networks, so it's resilient. So there are these servers all around the world that keep it going. So it's very resilient. But different governments have different legal regimes over the companies that work in their borders. And different governments also have different ways that they regulate or control internet service providers, so even the cables that come in and out of their country. So, for example, when the internet goes down in Syria, our telephone starts to ring and people say, oh, ICANN, you're the U.S., somebody in Washington called you and said, turn off Syria. But it's impossible. This doesn't work this way. What really happens is there are only about 3 ways that the internet gets into the territory of Syria, that there are only 2 internet service providers, that they're state-owned organizations, and by the way, the power supply to those companies can be turned off at any moment. So, but it's easier to rally a lot of the world into believing that it's a United States conspiracy, unfortunately. So the things that have been happening in the U.S. actually could happen anywhere. So search engines in Russia, or search engines, I hear there's going to be a search engine here. The laws under which those companies will operate may require them to show some of their information to the governments that regulate them. And so it's not something that we as an organization can really control, but it's very difficult because it reinforces this impression of this U.S. Big Brother. And so it's only really through dialogue and trying to educate to these nuances. I mean, it's very complex. It's much easier in many parts of the developing world to say, oh, the internet, it's taking forever to get here. This part of the world is getting very rich. There are some companies making a lot of money, and in my country, nobody's got the internet yet. We should just give the internet to the United Nations, and they'll give us the internet, which is an understandable thing, because it's much easier to say, oh, United Nations, everyone knows them. Everybody knows they were founded on a principle to do good things. But I had to spend sort of 20 minutes explaining our committees and our stakeholders and how it works. So ICANN is not really shorthand for anything yet. So again, these are things that I hope will work themselves out over time with more public discourse, but it's a very important juncture historically. On your second question about credit cards, I think credit cards will be gone in 10 years. I think they'll be gone in 5 years. This has a unique address that no one else has in it. And already, where I live, people are filling up their car with gas and going like this, or buying their coffee and going like this. And so these are becoming mobile wallets. Figuring out how to reserve your hotel for next week when you're going to Istanbul, I don't really know how you'll do it, but I think these will be some of the kind of new innovations that, again, the availability of the Internet Protocol addresses to everybody. Someone is working on technology to make credit cards obsolete. So I think there will be more security. There may be even biometric, you know, so, and already there is. Some people that are paying like this in Starbucks on the corner where I live, their picture comes up on the screen. Some people, I was in one coffee shop where you can sign up for their service. Where was I? There's a small town in California. If you sign up for their service, and I'm the barista making coffee here, and you're carrying your phone and you're walking from the corner, my Wi-Fi knows that you're walking toward my shop. I see your picture, I see what your favorite drink is, and by the time you walk through the door, you have a drink. It's ready. So these are innovations, and these are businesses that are coming about because of things like IP addresses. So it's an exciting time. It's a scary time because, as I said, you can't control or predict innovation. And also for governments who want to protect their people and preserve stability and prosperity for their people, the internet is not it's a great thing, but it also can be a scary thing. So this sort of geopolitical debate, my background, I started as a diplomat, and then I worked as a consultant in Silicon Valley for tech companies. So I find this very interesting, both from the technology aspects, but also the geopolitical aspects. Yeah.
Could you tell us a few words about safeguarding the system you've set up? I guess it's a mission, yeah?
So in terms of from...
Securing that the system is genuine, it's under your control, there are no fakes, fraud.
Right, right. So the one tool that we've promoted very heavily is the one that I alluded to. It's called Domain Name Extension Security. And it's a type of recognition software. But also at either end of an internet chain of information, there's actually a locked server that is kept behind lock and key. And then that identification travels with if you're requesting information from a website. And it has to pass through a series of servers around the world that all have the same security on it, and then come back to you, and then you know that it's a secure site. So if you see the HTTP in a browser, sometimes if it has an S, it's more secure. The fact is there are all kinds of, so that stops things like imposters, or they're called man-in-the-middle attacks, or some scams. The fact of sort of cyber attacks or espionage or all of these things, or sort of denial of service attacks, these are happening all of the time, actually. And you're seeing in a lot of international fora, like the OECD and the Council of Europe, and the Commonwealth states, sort of a focus on this issue of security, because that's a different kind of security that requires government, law enforcement, private sector, academics to, again, in a multi-stakeholder way, come up with solutions to make everything more secure. But most of us don't see it or feel it or hear about it. Companies that get attacked don't like to go into the newspaper and say, oh, we were attacked and our information was stolen. So a lot of the outputs of those discussions are bubbling up through our processes, so there will be, I think, more innovations. Already we have hotlines we cooperate with Interpol and Europol, and it's really, we have a very busy security team that's mostly responding to incidents that none of us ever hear about. So we try to keep it safe and secure. Yes, please.
Thank you, Chris, for, as you say, very highly informative talk. A couple of weeks ago, I was in another conference in Zagreb. The main focus was intellectual capital, and we heavily discussed about IP, intellectual property issues there. And the current and future threats of BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, maybe South Africa as well. As you say, there isn't a switch in your office, but we know that there's a technology switch in the US in the 6 main servers that no one in the world, I'm assuming, that knows that technology, how to run such a huge network. But sooner or later, one day, someone through espionage or through purchase of the information and all other avenues will get to that level to run large world-scale network. Do you foresee in the, I don't know, 20, 30 years now, maybe by 2050, there will be strong competitors to ICANN that is hosted maybe one of these BRICS countries?
It's a very interesting question, and it is one that, again, brings up these geopolitical issues. One of the things that ICANN does is it coordinates the root server system. So if you think of the domain name and addressing system as like a big phone book directory, these root servers are like the switchboards or the main books. And most of them are in the US, a couple of them are in Europe as well. And there are replicas of them also around the world, because the closer you are and the closer your computer is to one of them, the faster your information gets back to you. So I think that you're referring to those servers. On your specific question about competitors for ICANN, there are very big companies like the company VeriSign, which runs .com, which could probably do our job. Now, all of the coordinating and convening and multi-stakeholder negotiation part, they're probably not equipped to do, but they could probably do our job. On a regular basis, some countries sometimes say, we're going to form our own internet. And I've seen in the press that China and Iran in particular have invested in a lot of hardware to separate themselves if they would like to. I was in China actually in April, and I heard, first of all, how many people of those 2.7 billion are in China, do you think? Yeah, a little more. It's about 25% of everyone on the internet is in China right now. Half of everyone on the internet is in Asia. And so this minister in China, he said, we really like the internet. He said, we would really hate to take our 600 million people off of the internet and make our own internet. And so we really like ICANN and we like what you're doing. But there's sort of this concept that there could be many internets, which is contrary to our mission, which is to make sure there's only one. We use, if you can use in this region, but we talk about balkanization of the internet as something that we seek to avoid. But it's not impossible technologically that somebody could make their own internet or somebody could take over the technical functions of what we're doing. But it's more of the, I'll leave you with sort of another sort of geopolitical human interest, economic interest story, which I'm sure will be getting a lot more press in the coming weeks. I was reading my email today. There was a big hearing in the Senate in Brazil because a company called Amazon has applied for a domain name which is .amazon. And there is a state in Brazil and a state in Peru and a region of the world and a river, and it's called Amazon. And so today the Brazilian Senate unanimously voted to denounce Amazon's application and to support the rights of the people that feel very passionately about that name. And yet also I came from Singapore before I arrived here. And on the front page of the business newspaper in Singapore was an article about how happy Singapore consumers are because Amazon, the company, now has free shipping to everyone in Singapore. So they were interviewing housewives about how much they love Amazon, the company. So you have the very legitimate and very passionate, attachment to a name in the land of people living in Peru or Brazil. And you have happy housewives and shoppers in Singapore And these are the kind of competing interests that this system that I showed you has to adjudicate. Now, I'm very happy to say it's actually very impressive that there is a dialogue, that there is an advisory body of governments that has given advice on Amazon, and we've followed it, and now we're in a consultation period with the other stakeholder groups that are coming back with their compromise proposal. We're encouraging the parties to speak to among themselves, and I'm confident that whatever the outcome is, that the process will be judged to have been fair and worked. Now, again, we try to measure that by how happy people are with the outcome, but it's a very exciting time, and as I said, internet names and addresses at first sounds very dry and very technical, but this, I think, is one of the fascinating stories I'm working with right now. So, how are we doing? Do you want one more question?
Example for other organizations, and how far does language play a role? It seems that everything is in English, so isn't that an obstacle to many people in the world to participate?
Yes, it's a very good question. Thank you. The ICANN uses the 6 official UN languages, so all of our publications are in those 6. So we don't have Turkish, unfortunately, or sometimes, actually, I think the Brazilian government has funded for us to do some Portuguese translation. You'll find again, though, that we're still in the process of going from kind of a Anglo-American-centric focus. So if you start looking on our websites, you'll see most of it is still in English. But one of the services here, the second one the first one, My ICANN. If you go to myicann.org, you sign up for an account and you can get a weekly feed of information. And you can sort that information by your language. So if you only want the stuff that's coming in Spanish or Russian, you'll see that. It's also by topic and by category. So we've hired a new head of language services. We're working with UNESCO and other organizations to learn best practice on how to be truly multilingual. And again, on the internet user-facing side, as I said, I'm personally very enthusiastic about this internationalized domain name system so that users are using them in their own scripts in their own alphabet. But so far, ICANN is just working with the 6 UN languages and trying to become better at it all the time. All right. Thank you very much. It's been a great pleasure speaking to you.